growing up in Brooklyn, I'm starting here. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, growing up in Brooklyn, you know, you weren't that exposed to country music.
Yeah.
So my first exposure to hearing Hank Williams was at a girl's Sweet 16 party. And people were dancing to these things from the 50s, pop music, kind of schmaltzy pop music.
Mm-hmm.
And like Billy Eckstine and Tony Bennett, you know, people like that, Perry Como, slow dancing. And occasionally they would do kind of like a fast dance, like a Lindy Hop kind of thing. This is like early 50s, was it? Something like that. And so somehow a Hank Williams record got slipped onto the changer, and people didn't like it. Oh, take that off. We can't dance to that. You know. So these Brooklyn gals felt, and I was so intrigued with it. So I just I put the record in my vest and I walked out with it. And that was the beginning of my addiction to Hank Williams.
No kidding. Good.
So I played it and I got familiar with more songs in his repertoire. And it was just the beginning of my music career. Take these chains from my heart, set me free. You've grown cold and no longer care for me. All my faith in you is gone, but the heartache linger on. Take these chains from my heart, set me free. I'm singing off key, so these chains from my heart and set me free. Let's do it again.
Oh, you gotta keep going, keep going.
Okay, I'm gonna do the whole thing over again.
Oh, that's oh yeah.
What?
You got it working.
Okay. Well, what do you? Take these chains from my heart and set me free. You've grown cold and no longer care for me. All my faith in you is gone, but the heartache linger on. Take these chains from my heart and set me free. Take these tears from my eyes and let me see just a spark of the love that used to be. And if you no longer care for the love that's beating there, take these chains from my heart and set me free.
Yeah. Whew. Now,
That's one story.
all right. What was in you, do you think, that, you know, you had that New York environment, you're growing up in Brooklyn and all that, and that's such antithetical kind of, I mean, it's so opposite from what's going on the streets of Brooklyn for your age. Is there something that, what kind, you know, where did this kid get the notion to hear that?
It's a karmic thing.
It's a karmic thing, yeah.
Man, I was a country guy in another life, because I had this strong affinity for it, you know. It just kind of grabbed me.
Yeah.
And so,
there you go.
yeah, what can you do? But, you know, there's so many people from all over now that are into country music now that, you know, mass communication has occurred. You know, there are the Brooklyn Cowboys, there are people from all over the world doing country music. You know, you have Japanese country singers and whatnot. So, you know, I was just a little bit more ahead of the curve, you know, at that time, but that's what's happened. You know, everybody could identify with cowboys and the country music scene. You know?
Well, we were growing up with
Hank
it too.
Sasaki, he's a country singer, cowboy from Japan. You know, so.
Well, all us kids were getting Gene Autry and Roy Rogers on the TV sets and all that. They were our heroes.
Cowboys thing, movies, right?
Yeah.
So that's that story, you know.
All right.
Then I moved over to Greenwich Village and became a folkie. you know, and I learned all the folk songs, traditional folk songs. I played with bluegrass bands in Washington Square Park, Greenwich Village. And then I started to get gigs in the coffee houses, the cafes of Greenwich Village, and the folk boom that started. But I still had those country songs on demo. I wrote a bunch of country songs. And I hung around Tin Pan Alley. I went to the Brill Building and I knocked on doors. And this fly-by-night record company called Lido Records with Leo Rogers, he was interested in my sound. He said, "Oh man, kid," he said, "if you could write some sexy songs, we'll record you." So it was like rockabilly was happening, and he thought I was a little bit like Ricky Nelson and Elvis Presley. So I went back home, wrote some rockabilly tunes, and a few weeks later we recorded them. He sold the masters, he licensed the masters to Coral Brunswick, the label that Buddy Holly was on. So they came out, and I was on Bandstand, and I did record hops, and it was I did Midnight Special. It's something I just re-recorded recently, but that was the first record I did. Plus back with some of my own tunes. And so I was doing folk rock before it was even a thing. This was in the late 50s. You know, folk rock came in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
So I was ahead of the curve there. Then I played in the cafes, and I met all the folkies like Tim Hardin and Richie Havens and Hoyt Axton. I sang with some of them. Bob Dylan would come into the Cafe Raffaello and say, "Hey Rusty, can I play piano with you?" So we'd sing some blues songs. And yeah.
Wow.
And so
wow.
We got the tip basket, and we got some character put a $10 bill in the tip basket, and I gave it all to Bobby. And I used to buy him drinks at the Mills Tavern.
How old was he then?
20 years old.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that was a time.
Wow.
And later in the 60s, I moved to LA and produced records for a few labels, some of the acid rock bands. And I wrote songs around that time too. I had this group called the Third Bardo, recording one of my tunes that has recently become an underground classic.
Third Bardo. I don't think I ever heard of them.
They never happened back when they recorded in 1967. They were an obscure band. They were on Roulette Records.
Were they LA or?
They were in New York. This is just before I moved to LA. I recorded them, and I wrote the song "I'm 5 years ahead of my time." Little did I know I was more like 15 years ahead of my time, because about 10 or 15 years ago, someone did a pirate release of that song on a compilation called Pebbles. There's a compilation of garage bands, and the Third Bardo was on this compilation, and people really tuned into it. So people all over the world, especially in Europe, are listening to that song. It's been recut by the Exterminators, a punk band from, I think, Scotland.
5 years ahead of my time.
Yeah.
Sounds
so I get a few bucks
strangely
from
interesting.
BMI and some royalty money from the publisher, but
Think you're
it's
gonna,
nothing I'm going to retire on. But
you're gonna pull that one out some Rusty Evans night on stage? The 5 years ahead of your.
Yeah. The band is.